What could this be, guys? Well, we're going to tell you a little bit later in the episode, so you'll have to watch the whole time. But I'm so excited today. We are going to be speaking about radical generosity. And who better to tell us about it than the 2024 world champion of public speaking, Luisa Montalvo. Now, some of the things you need to know about her is not only is she an amazing speaker, she's someone that has a heart of gold. She has literally helped over 1,000 animals in multiple ways, fostering them, helping them get placed with wonderful families. In Texas, she is someone that in a lot of ways is just a superhero for these animals. And we're going to talk about not just what it takes to make that deep of an impact, but what you can do with your storytelling, with your communication skills, and all the different areas of your life where you can be more radically generous. I'm really excited to have her on today. And I just want to welcome you to the Leveling Up podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, let's start off here. Tell us a little bit about your pathway all the way from 2019, where you got into the finals of Toastmasters, all the way to 2024, where you were able to take home that coveted trophy of being the world champion of public speaking.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the question. Toastmasters International, a nonprofit organization, helps you become a better public speaker. I've been a member for about 8 years, and I competed in 2019, going for the coveted world champion, which is the best speaker in the world, according to Toastmasters International. There were about 140 countries involved with 33,000 participants, and my 95-year-old mentor just told me to go have fun. And I started having fun that year after 7 years of competing. I just said, okay, well, you know what? This is going to be my last year competing, so I'm just going to get out there and have fun. And I did, and it's a few stages you have to go through to actually make it to the finals stage, where there's 8 of you competing for the top prize. And I came in second in the world. Did not know I was the first Hispanic to make it that high up the ladder. When I did go to Puebla, Mexico, and do a keynote, a lady approached me and said, congratulations and good luck trying to be first in the world. And I looked at her, I said, I think I'm done. I think I'm good. And she said, no, if anybody can make it to the first place in the world, it would be you. You could be the first Hispanic to do that. And so I went back to the drawing board and started competing again. And then in 2024, last year, making it all the way to the #1 spot in the world. And here I am. So
that's beautiful. You think about the heroes that you've had in your life, you now get to be that hero for somebody else. Maybe this little Mexican girl or Latina is just like, oh, I want to be just like Luisa. I want to be able to share my message with the world. That's so inspiring that you've been able to not just compete at the highest level, but now win at the highest level. That's so amazing. One of the things I want to talk about for just a moment is, what does generosity and radical generosity look like in your life, Luisa?
Radical generosity, if you're talking about me, all I know that I do is I try to do as much as I can, as often as I can. When you talk about other people and their radical generosity, after my accident back in 2022, leaving me in a wheelchair, I quickly learned that everybody wants to help. It's just instilled in us somehow. And when I ask people to help me get my wheelchair out of the trunk of my car, or when I ask people to help me walk to a building, everybody wants to help. And to me, that kind of generosity that I guess I never really had experienced before, because I believe I was never in a position to need it. And now that I needed it, people were stepping up. So it was amazing to be on the receiving end as much as the giving.
That's so amazing. One of the things that sticks out to me is when I was a young missionary for my church, I'd served for 2 years. I always had this desire to give everything that I could to help serve somebody else. And sometimes it was a little awkward having people give me things. I think it's so interesting that we have this desire to serve others, but when we are hesitant to receive, sometimes we're actually blocking those blessings. So what was it like for you being able to receive radical generosity from other people? Did you have the resistance initially?
Oh, absolutely, because I am not the kind of person that needs anything. I don't need anybody's help. My father had instilled in me that if you ask for help, it means you're weak. And
Mm.
I didn't want to look weak in my father's eyes. But a really good friend of mine told me last year, when I was telling her I was hesitant to ask people for help, she said, "Can I ask you something?" I said, "Sure." She says, "How do you feel when you help someone?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's euphoric. I feel great. It's just something that really brings me alive." And she said, "You are denying that feeling to others who want to help you."
Mm.
And I had never thought of it that way. And she said, "When you allow people to help you, they go home feeling the way you feel when you help someone." And so she put that into perspective for me. And now I realize I'm probably helping them just as much as they're helping me.
This is beautiful. One of the concepts I like to talk about in my coaching practice is the open hands principle. If you're just as willing with open hands to receive as you are with open hands to give, God's going to just pour out blessings on us because he knows when your cup is filled and it's overflowing, you're like, "Hey guys, come over here. I've got more that I want to share with you." And you're not getting rid of any of the blessings for yourself by sharing with others. I think that's part of this
Right.
radical generosity idea. Now, there is one thing here that I think is really interesting. I come from a linguistic background because I speak Mandarin and also Spanish, so maybe we'll do a little bit of that. But I wanted to ask you, when someone is using language that you're familiar with or ideas or stories you're familiar with as an audience member, why is that being generous by not using jargon and things that are over people's heads, but making sure that it is a message that people receive and can understand? Why is that so important for you?
I believe it's important for me. I don't try to put on airs.
Mhm.
I think it's a part of an ego thing. If I sit here and spew all these huge words that nobody understands, now I'm making my audience feel intimidated, and I don't want
Mm.
that. And then another factor is that I realized with Toastmasters, they are global. So English, for I would say at least half of our members, is not a first language. So
Yeah.
they have mastered the English language well. But why would I want to go and use words that may be out of their reach or they would have to look up? I love expanding my vocabulary, but when it comes to a speech, I want it to be as nice and plain and simple to where if a third grader was watching my speech, they would be able to understand what it is I'm trying to convey in my message. And that's all it is, plain and simple. I'm not here to boast, I'm not here to brag. I'm trying to check my ego and I'm just trying to get my message across. And I feel the best way to do that is to put it in just simple layman's terms, and we're good.
I think this is brilliant. Guys, if we can simplify our jargon to be useful words that everybody in the audience will understand, like that third grade level that you talked about, it will start to resonate with more of our audience. And this is
Mhm.
so key. How did you do that in your speech? Because I know for anybody to win at the highest level, they have to think, how is this going to be received? Is this like a universal message? Is this story going to be something that's meaningful? How did you tailor that message specifically for your audience so that they got the most value out of that? Was it 37 survivors? Is that the right title?
37 strangers.
Strangers. That's right. Thank you.
Yeah, I was the survivor, but there
You're
were
the survivor.
37
37
strangers
strangers. It helped you do it.
that that
Yes.
that came and assisted me after the accident to make sure I stayed alive, which was amazing. But I think the one thing that we have to remember, or as a speaker, you want to remember is you want your audience to be able to relate to what
Mhm.
you're speaking about. And the hardest thing for me with that speech was if you really listen to it, I'm talking about a dark time that I went through. And I am not a person that suffers from depression or anxiety. But yet, during that time in my life, it was probably the most difficult time for me to get through because I'm always like, let's go, let's go, let's go. And
Mm.
when the ability to walk is taken from you or from
Oof.
anyone that has been able to walk, especially myself that was always running, always on the go, and for that to just stop, I didn't know how to handle that. So, just like you go with stages of grief or anything, I had to, I think, go through all these stages of depression that I was in. And I kind of wanted to let my audience know, look, we all go through some really rough times in our life. But if we just keep going, it's better than just giving up. Because to me, if you give up after you've gone through so much, then that was almost for nothing. To where
Mm.
you've gone through so much and you keep going, most of the time you're almost there. You just don't know it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of what I wanted to convey in my message. And I went with an emotion. And anytime you go with an
Mm.
emotion, you're able to reach a global audience.
I think that's a beautiful, simple way to talk about this. Let's go with an emotion. Let's break it down. What does that mean to go with an emotion to you?
Okay, for example, in 2019, I gave a speech on racism. There are actually parts of the world where there is no racism, and
Mm.
very few people do experience it if they do. So I went with something that was happening to me where I was. So it wasn't a global message, it was a look, this happened to me. But last year, 2024, I went with an emotion. And it does not matter where you are in this world, we all go through the emotions. So when you hone in or pick an emotion and base your speech on that, you're going to be able to affect your entire audience instead of just part of your audience.
Mm. This is beautiful and such an actionable thing too, because you can frame your story in so many different ways. But if you figure out what's the universal emotion that you can be in Taiwan, or you could be in Mexico, or you could be anywhere in the world, and everyone feels that frustration or they feel that anxiety, maybe they feel pent up, whatever that emotion is, and you say, let's harness that. And then as you're drawing the emotion out, people will be able to be like, oh, that's when I was also going through something similar. And that's the bridge that comes through storytelling.
Mhm.
Beautiful
Absolutely.
example. Love it.
Absolutely.
Anything else to add to that before we move on to the next thing?
No, no, that was it.
No. Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. I thought emotion, so good. This is phenomenal. One of the other elements to radical generosity I want to talk about is to give your all, your everything. And I have a simple little physical example for you guys. If you've never seen one of these, I want to turn around. This is called a widow's mite. Now, the widow's mite in biblical times, this was one of the least expensive denominations of money. But there was this time when we had this old lady and she was putting in this widow and she's putting in her money for basically like her tithing to say, this is all that I have. And she put in her money. And that represented everything that she had in material means. She gave her all. And then Jesus, when he was giving this example, he's like, well, these other people, they gave thousands and thousands of dollars in our own vernacular. But who was it that gave more? The lady who had very little, almost nothing, and gave the widow's mite, or someone who had plenty and gave just a sliver? This is a massive distinction when it talks about generosity. Giving your all doesn't mean we expect you to empty your bank accounts and give everything to the poor, because if you don't have anything left, you now are not able to continue to help others. But giving your all and that widow's mite style of radical generosity, that's what I want to get your take on, Luisa. How do you give your all on stage?
That's a great question. I believe the stage is probably one of the places where I have no problem giving my all. And it was with the idea, or for me, the radical idea, that when I got on stage, it wasn't necessarily for me to win. I wanted to leave my audience with a message. I wanted to teach them something they might not have known about themselves. And to me, when you go about it with the idea that, look, if I don't place, if I don't win, if I don't come in first, second, or third, it's okay. I'll be back next year. And that's actually
Mm.
the attitude that I had going into this. So because of that, right now, being that I can no longer compete after coming in first in the world, I'm almost a fish out of water because I'm looking for, look, I need to compete. I want to go and I want to continue with
Yeah.
messages and continue inspiring and motivating. So that's something that I'm having to do now on my own, not through Toastmasters. But
Mm.
I think putting everything out there on stage for me, that is never a problem. I actually look forward to doing that.
Mhm. I think this is such a great distinction. Sometimes when we are 100% prepared and we have a message that we know will benefit our audience, it's easy to be like, I'm so excited to give you this. And then you just pour it into your audience. I think when people feel anxious about anything that they want to share online or on any stage, it's when they don't feel prepared or competent, or they don't really know how to frame their story or idea so that it's helpful for somebody else. Maybe
Mm.
they ramble on or they get stuck on one thing and they run out of time because they got hyper focused on one element so much that they forget, oh, we need to make sure we understand where you're going with this. So let's talk about structure for a moment. Sometimes simplicity is the way that we need to go. And sometimes we have to literally cut out a lot of the things that we want to say for simplicity's sake. Would you talk about how you're radically generous in the way that you organize and simplify your message, packaging it so that people not only understand, but they can do something with it?
When it comes to speaking, I know I've been coached or it's been mentioned that if you want to get your idea across, it should basically be just one idea in your entire speech.
Mm,
And I'm the opposite of that.
mhm,
If you go back and listen to my speech, there should be 4 or 5 different sections of the audience that I reached out to. And it's almost like when you cook spaghetti, I don't know if you know, you throw it on the wall, and if it sticks to the wall, then it's ready. And so what I try to do in my speech is instead of just honing in on one idea or one concept, I try to put in a little bit of everything so that I'm able to reach different
mm,
people in the audience. So that's what I do. So when you're asking about radical generosity, this is what I try to do. I don't just specifically talk about one thing. I try to make it a few things. That way I try to get everybody involved so everybody can try to walk away with a message or an inspiration.
This is what I'm hearing, Luisa. You care enough about your audience that you're going to frame your stories, frame your ideas with multiple benefits from people in all different walks of life. You're not just going to share that idea in a general sense that's only going to help one demographic of people. You're
Nope.
saying, this is how this helps this person. Oh, and this person, and this person. And here's why, what this means for you is. And then you rack up the benefits so that they can see it for themselves. I think that is absolutely phenomenal. I love the idea of throwing spaghetti at the wall. I have not tried that yet. I tell my kids not to throw spaghetti, but it ends up on the floor or on the table all the time.
That
That's how it
that's not
goes.
ready.
It's not ready. Darn it. If it sticks on the wall, then it's ready. That's
It's
beautiful.
ready.
One of the things I really enjoy is I love learning languages. I'm fluent in Mandarin Chinese and Spanish. I've been dabbling with French and ASL. Can you talk about what it takes to not just hone your language, but to make sure that it is clear? Because there's one thing to be able to simplify the jargon, it's another to make sure that your grammar and everything is put together in a way that even members that aren't as familiar with the language can understand you because they understand your body language and they understand what you're trying to say all the way through your speech.
So two things when it comes to language. One is, as I was a child growing up, my father would repeatedly say, you need to know English perfectly because you live in the United States, and people are going to say, you live here in the United States, you need to know English. And yet, when we would go visit relatives in Mexico, my father said, and now all your relatives are going to expect you to know perfect Spanish. So you
Mm.
need to know the two. So I studied English as much as I could when I was in high school, trying to get everything right, all the conjugated verbs and all that. But not only that, I wound up listening to myself and found that my enunciation, my diction, my pronunciation was off. And so I strived to make it to where it's almost perfect, because the last thing I want is someone from another country or even the United States to come back and say, I didn't understand what she said. What did she say? That's the
Mm.
last thing that I want someone to worry about. So, with anything that I say, I've gone and I've practiced proper diction, enunciation, pronunciation, to where that's going to be the last thing on the list that somebody can come back and say, I didn't understand what you were saying.
Mm. This is absolutely essential. I used to teach Mandarin Chinese in high school. For 7 years, I did that in the public school system. And the thing that I was most interested in is making sure that my students had comprehensible input, meaning every word that came out of my mouth, they understood clearly. And then if they didn't know the word because it was in a different language, I would make sure they understood by either pausing and pointing at like a definition, or contextualizing it really clearly with my body language or in a
Mhm.
story. This is absolutely essential if you want to have pocket fluency in a language, meaning whatever context you're in, you say, hey, this is what I want to learn. This is why it's important to me. If it's relevant and it's something that you're going to be talking about often, master those phrases that you need to use. Now, what does this
Mhm.
do for you as a communicator? Everyone that is listening, when you master the most common contexts, and you are clear in your phrasing and you're clear in the way that people speak with you, suddenly you're not worrying about how you're saying things. You're worrying more about what you're saying. And your audience will be doing the same thing. If they're not distracted with really poor pronunciation or distracted with clutter, as far as your verbal clutter, ums, ahs, ers, all that, whatever those sounds are that you make, it makes it much easier to understand. And with understanding, people can implement your message. If they don't understand it, it's just like a sieve. We're going to use a spaghetti example. It's like you're trying to get the spaghetti in there and you're getting the water out, but maybe the holes are way too big, and now all the spaghetti goes through the holes. They didn't understand it and nothing stuck.
Nothing
But
stuff.
if you have it tight, you have your language exactly the way that it needs to be because it's well practiced and rehearsed to the point that it is internalized, that shifts everything for you.
The right way. Mhm.
Now, Luisa, when you're practicing, when you're putting in the intentionality to make sure that you internalize your message, what does that process look like for you to be at the elite world class level?
What I do is I will write a speech. It usually starts out to be 10, 15 minutes long. Then I go back and eliminate what isn't contributing to the thought or idea behind the speech. That takes it down to about 7 or 8 minutes. I still need to go back then and simplify so that everything that I'm saying is going to be understood. And then I practice with Toastmaster clubs around the world and
Mm,
listen to their feedback. Again, I have a workshop I do on how to write the women's speech. And with this
mm,
workshop, it will say that one of the things is when you are going to give a speech, the more people that understand it, the better for the audience and the better
mm,
for yourself. So that's what I try to do. I try to make it a global message. But again, starting with a 15-minute speech, you take it down to 10 minutes, then you take it down to 5 minutes, and you can add a little if you want, only because you don't want to be disqualified if you go over time. But I think simplifying the message and simplifying the language is key, along with putting in that personal story that's going to get the audience engaged and wanting to listen. So
Mm.
that's my take on it.
That's beautiful. And this is very simple. Anybody can do this, guys. You write your longer speech, 15, even if you have to do an hour-long speech, whatever you need to do, you get it out of your system so it's not in your head anymore. And then you just take out that hacksaw and you just hack it away until it's just what has to be there. This is
Right.
the idea of making sure that it's significant. What's funny, Luisa, is your process is so similar to what I teach people, all about hitting your story. It starts with significance. What is the most essential elements? After you get everything out on page, you have to figure out, what do I need to take out of this so I can take this and translate it from page to the stage? And once we take it from the page to the stage, then we have to figure out, now, how do I make sure the stage presence of my story and the message is serving the audience in the very best way possible? For me, one of the things I like to focus on is also the objective. What's the purpose behind this specific message? And if we can really hone in and help the audience understand what the purpose is, and we translate it for the audience so they can see why it matters for them, all of the performative elements while you're reliving your story will start to come in. And the yes at the very end of my story framework, this is where that clear and concise call to action comes. So when you're choosing what you want people to do based on your message, what are some of the ways that you've been able to say, hey, this is the thing that if you got nothing else out of this, this is what I want? How do you distill those moments of magic?
That's a great question. And in my semifinal speech last year, I talk about how my sixth grade band director told me I couldn't play drums. So I went my entire life hearing that resonate in my mind. You can't play drums. So when I wound up watching a video of somebody playing drums, I thought, oh, wait a minute, I can go back and I can play the drums. And in the very end of my speech, the conclusion, I told my audience, I said, look, don't wait 64 years to realize you can do anything with your life. The
Mm,
mental paradigm shift has to happen, but it has to happen now, because these
beautiful.
seconds turn into months, turn into years.
Mm,
So all I do when I summarize is you never want to attack your audience. You never
right.
want to make your audience feel like they've made a mistake. So when I said, don't make the same mistake I made. In other
Mm,
words, this was my bad. So, I'm trying to teach you, look, don't do this. And then in my 2024 winning speech at the very end, I said, so are you ready to hit that reset button on your life? Okay, let's all do this. In other words, do it with me. Ready?
mm,
Clear? Clear. So if you ask them to join you or to help you or to come along with you on the journey, your
mm.
audience is going to be receptive to that, as to, you've been doing this wrong your whole life. Nobody wants to hear that. So when you
Yeah.
ask your audience, hey, look, this is what I did, don't do this. Hey, come with me, let's all do this together. That's how you get your audience involvement.
This is beautiful. And it's something that the elite absolutely do. Because if you say, hey, you need to do this and you need to do this, people are like, no, I don't. But as soon as we say, this is what I did, here's the value that I got from it, or here's what I did, please don't do that too, so you don't have to have the same pain. Those are both coming with you as the speaker rather than saying, just go do that thing and pushing. It's just like, have you ever tried to push a rope? Right?
Yeah,
You push a rope, it doesn't work very well. You can pull because you're on the other side and you're giving that resistance. But if you push the rope, it's just kind of like a little limp noodle. You throw the spaghetti on
yeah,
the wall and it doesn't stick. So
there you
wonderful.
go.
Now, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish that I had, because there's some story that's in your head? You're like, oh my gosh, I want to leave this message with the audience. If they knew nothing else about me and I never got to speak to them ever again, this is the thing you need to know about Luisa Montalvo. And this is something that is so essential.
I believe that when anybody has the honor or privilege to be on a stage to address an audience, that they should leave the audience better than when they found the way they found them.
Mm.
So to me, instilling a message or inspiration or motivation is more important than winning a trophy.
Mm.
I was at a conference last year and someone came up and said, I still remember what you talked about when you gave that speech. And I said, that was 8 years ago. And she said, yes, but I remember it. And I hadn't even placed at that contest. And then I
Mm.
looked at her, I said, can you tell me what the first place winner talked about? And she said, I have no idea. So I would rather make an impression on someone for them to be able to remember what I said than to walk home with a trophy. So
Mm.
anytime you are granted the privilege to speak to an audience, try to leave them with something that maybe coming into it they didn't have, whether it be inspirational, motivational, knowledge, anything. Try to leave them better than the way you found them.
That's such a beautiful sentiment and something that you do consistently in your life, just by the way that I've heard from you from today. I'm definitely better because of this conversation. So thank you, Luisa, for practicing what you preach, because it comes out in your confidence. And I love that.
Thank
One
you.
thing that I forgot to ask you that I would love to get at least a little bit more insight on is, I know that you love saving animals. And would you mind sharing one story of what it's like to either place an animal that was in a really bad situation? I know you've done this literally over 1,000 times, helping find animals. What's one of those meaningful moments where you're able to place an animal in a household and maybe change somebody's life or left that household better because of it?
Well, first of all, realize that we have a terrible problem here in South Texas where we have stray dogs on the street all the time. So our shelters are always full and we're
Mhm.
always looking for homes for dogs. And a lot of rescues, God bless them because they are from the East Coast. Actually, they're from all over the United States. I've dealt mainly with a lot of rescues on the East Coast, and they're the ones saving our dogs from, you know, guaranteed euthanasia. So when it comes to being able to take a dog and find it a home, they have just so many days at the shelter. They're taken off the streets because people complain about the dog problem. So they're taken to the shelter. From the shelter, I would go and pull 30, 40 dogs every 2 weeks. Then you have to quarantine them and go through that process. Then you get them on transport and then you take them up to your rescue, wherever they may be located. And they have people lined up waiting to adopt these dogs. And I think the beautiful thing about that, other than the reality of them saving a dog, is that 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, I'm still getting updates on dogs that were pulled from the shelter here. And they said, hey, remember when you found Ringo and you brought Ringo to us? Well, we still have him. And remember when you have Mango? And they show me pictures and updates. And these dogs have gone from nothing and certain death to, going and walking every day, and they're wearing outfits and they've got their own beds and they've got brothers and sisters they play with, and it is so heartwarming to see that, to think, wow, 5, 6, 7 years later, these people are still telling me, look, I've still got that dog that you brought us years back. And that's
Beautiful.
just, you can't buy that kind of happiness.
I think that's one of the biggest reasons we want to raise animals, is so that they can become a part of our family. I've got one little cat that just walked by. He's over there if you can see him. He's being a little stinker, but his name's Tugger. But one of the things that I absolutely love about that story is when someone is struggling, not just an animal, when someone's struggling and you're able to help them out of their situation where they can absolutely have a life that's better. That's what you do as a speaker. That's what you do as a communicator. When you share great stories, you are taking them from the streets of their mind and providing another opportunity, a new house of thinking. I think that's the biggest value of what you're talking about as well.
I like
You
the
do this with
analogy. I like
animals.
that
Yeah.
parallel. Yes.
Absolutely. It's a huge parallel
Yeah.
to speaking. So thank you so much for being here. I feel like you definitely went the widow's mite around of giving every single thing that you had on today. Thank you so much, Luisa, for being who you are and continuing to save these animals. I think it's such a great message.
Thank you.
Where is it that people can find you online?
No, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook Messenger. My email, although I never really check my email, although I've had to now, is montalvo.luisa@yahoo.com.
Perfect.
But anybody needs any help, anything that I can do to help, if I'm not able to do it, I can find somebody that can help you. So
That's beautiful. Yeah, so definitely go check her out. Luisa Montalvo, wonderful speaker. Grateful to be here. Now, one of the things I love to ask my guests, now that we've had this experience together, tell people why they want to listen to the Leveling Up podcast. What would be the value of not only listening to this episode, but connecting with these types of communication skills that helps you level up your skill sets, your mindsets, and tool sets all around storytelling? Why is that so valuable?
well, I tell you, the one thing that again I love about podcasts and this one is you didn't just speak about one thing. You spoke about many things. And I think the human mind wants to know more than just a few things. So when you're able to cover different areas and different topics, that's what makes a podcast interesting. And you've done
Mm,
that. So the reason to do that is because you, again, and also you referenced your religion, you referenced God. And for people that need to hear something other than what they hear in a church or anything, I
mm.
think that's really good also. So I like the fact that you were very broad in your areas of what we spoke about. So that's good. That's amazing. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Luisa. And I really appreciate you being here. Guys, continue to level up your life. I'll just remind you, if you are feeling anxiety in the way that you show up and you want to be able to clarify your message, I wrote a wonderful book for you. It's called 3 Reasons Stage Fright Costs and Why You Must Fix It. Go to this, thefinalpercent.com/Brigham Blackham, and you also can have that book. I always have it right there. But I hope you have a blessed day. And next week is Thanksgiving. So I'm just so grateful to have all of you wonderful followers, all of you wonderful people. Oh, is your puppy here? I need to see. Oh, there you are. Look at that guy. What's his name?
Her name is Color, and I pulled her from the rescue. It was freezing,
Cute.
and they had her on a huge doggy bed, and they had a live thing going on. And I saw her, and I just commented and said, "Hey, I'll take that one." She said, "Okay, come
Take
and
that
get
one.
her." And the next day I did, and here she is.
Oh, that's so great. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here. I will end the live stream, guys. Appreciate you for being here. Come back again next Thursday. We're going to have a lot more value for you every single time. God bless.
God bless. Thank you.